What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Game Time Podcast. We've got a very special guest in the building here today. We have the radio voice of the Indiana Pacers, Mark Boyle, in the building. Mark Boyle has been the longtime radio announcer for the Indiana Pacers. He is a five-time Indiana Sportscaster of the Year, and not only that, he was in the Indiana Sports Writers and Sportscasters Hall of Fame in 2013. Mark, it is awesome to have you on the show. Great having you on here for this interview on the Game Time Podcast.
My pleasure.
All right, Mark, to kick things off, if you could kind of give us a bit of an introduction for you and your career, what got you started here in Indiana, and just kind of your journey as a sports announcer.
Well, I've been here a long time. This last season was my 37th, but in the years leading up to that, like many of us in the profession, I moved around a lot. I started off in a small town in Montana, eastern Montana, Miles City, and from there I went to Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. After that, I was in Dubuque, Iowa, St. Cloud, Minnesota. Then I was in Minneapolis, and then I worked in New York at the very first all-sports radio station in the United States, WFAN. After that, I was in St. Louis, and I came here then in time for the 1988-1989 season.
Gotcha. When you talk about this season a little bit, and then I'll give it over to one of my co-hosts. I remember seeing some tweets, and just these moments you had. You said it was some of the most exciting basketball you've called in a very long time. You know, if you could sum this season up for yourself, how would you describe this season as a whole?
Well, that's probably as good a way as any. It was exciting. It was clearly successful. So those would be the two words that would come to mind. And then on top of that, this team played a very entertaining style. And so that added to the whole equation. But just in general, it was successful. It was exciting. It was fun for us. And by us, I mean players, coaches, broadcasters, people that work for the franchise and have for a long time, to see how engaged the fans got as the playoff ride became longer and longer. And I'm not naive. I'm sure if next season the team is 37 and 45, it'll be back to nobody paying attention in April again. That's how sports work in almost every city. If the team does well, the bandwagon gets full. And even though bandwagon fans tend to come and go, it's still exciting when they engage. And to have the whole city talking about the team was pretty cool. I think everybody was really enjoying it.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I think, from people that I've talked to, they were just like, how much the city came together, whether people, like you said, hopped on the bandwagon or not. It felt like everybody was watching the Pacers throughout this playoff run. I'm going to hand it over to Darrell. Darrell, you've been waiting to have this interview and everything like that. So I'm excited to hand you the floor here. And also I'm excited that I was able to get this interview for you as well.
Well, I appreciate that, Isaiah. So Mark, I've got a lot of questions for you. So I'm going to try to go chronological order and give these guys an opportunity to ask as well. One of the things that sticks out for me from you when you start off, when we're in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, you always say the world's greatest basketball arena or something to that effect. Can you give me the genesis behind your statement of that? Because it's kind of almost like it's a signature now, it seems like.
Well, it's very subjective. There's no way to quantify it. These arenas aren't ranked from 1 to 30. And when I say the world's greatest, to me, it's because our people do such a great job with it. They renovated it a few years ago. It's now north of 25 years old. There are buildings that are better places to watch games. There are buildings that are louder. But the way they take care of this building and everything around it, they added the plaza this last couple of years. There's a lot of cool stuff going on around outside. The building itself is vibrant. It's clean. In my opinion, it's everything you'd want if you were coming to an event. And it's not just basketball games. I call it the world's greatest basketball arena, but it also houses concerts and other events. And our staff does such a great job, and they're meticulous in their care of the building. We go into some of these newer buildings, they're 3 or 4 years old, and they look like they're 30 or 40 years old. This one looks like it's 3 or 4 weeks old. They take great care of it. It's a great place to watch a game. It has everything you could ever want. And I just marvel at the job they do taking care of it and making sure that it is a great facility.
Good. That's a good point. When the renovations came up, they took it for a tour. You're talking about being amazed on how it went from Market Square Arena to Conseco, then the changeover. I think that was at 2019 or 2020 when they did the changeover, which was awesome. So, other question I've got, your style, right? Your style is different. I do a lot of traveling across the eastern side of the country. Hear a lot of radio announcers, a lot of broadcast teams. You have a distinct style. It's balanced. If I wasn't a Pacer watcher, I would not know that this is a Pacer broadcast unless it was the Game 7 in New York, Game 7 in Mark Square when Rick Smith hits the big shot against Orlando. So what brought your style to where it is, and what feedback have you received or maybe coaching or teaching in your earlier days that made this the Mark Boyle that we hear today?
Well, my style evolved over time. When I started, I realized shortly after I started that there's no one way or no right way to do this. There are guys that do it 180 degrees differently than I do who have been enormously successful. The basics are essential: time, score, and on radio, you have to be descriptive because there's no picture. But beyond that, you can do it any way you want. So I decided early in my career that I wanted to broadcast the game the way I would like to hear it if I was listening. And to me, since there is no picture, your credibility is your number one asset. And if I am raving about how great the team is all the time, even when they stink, then my credibility goes out the window. I need the listener to believe me when I say X, Y, or Z, or at the very least, believe that I think it's the truth. And that's why if we criticize officials, we'll do so even if they make calls that favor the Pacers, because we want fans to see what we see. Now, you say, Darrell, that you can't tell it's a Pacer broadcast. I do try to make it Pacers centric. And by that, I mean this: we spend more time talking about Pacer players than we do guys on the opposing team. We chronicle what's going on with the Pacers more than we do with, say, the Celtics if they're coming in for a game. But other than that, the description is down the middle. And if we're on the road, my job is to convey what's going on. And so if we're in Boston, for example, and the Celtics hit a shot with 18 seconds to go to give them the lead and the crowd's into it, it might sound like a Celtics broadcast because that's what's happening. I'm not going to be the guy that gets devastated if the Pacers lose or fail. I want the Pacers to win. I want to make that clear. I work for the franchise. They've been great to me. And let's face it, all of us benefit if they do well. That said, my passion is more for the broadcast than it is the outcome of the game. And I want somebody who's listening to be able to say to themselves, you know what? I saw that game the way I would see it if I were there. That's my ultimate goal. I understand it's impossible. You can't literally see it on radio, but my goal is to make you see it. And one of the reasons I got into radio as a young boy when I would listen, I'm old enough that most games weren't on TV when I was growing up. So we had to access them on radio. And it just fascinated me that in my mind's eye, I could see what was happening to the Twins in Anaheim when they were playing the Angels, even though I had no picture because the broadcasters were so good. So that's my goal, to get you to see what I see and to believe what I say, or at least to believe that I believe it. We make mistakes, but we're not going to sugarcoat anything. If we do need to be critical, we'll do so in a professional, non-personal manner. But it's our job to broadcast the event, not to cheer for the home team.
And I appreciate that. And that's a good segue to my third question, because I'm not going to steal the time from my guys. But one of the things that I heard on the broadcast was during the finals, you and Eddie had a little back and forth about the Jalen Williams, having them both have the same name. Mm-hmm. And Eddie says, well, because they call him J-Dub or something like that. And Eddie says, well, I think that's kind of cool. And you said, well, it can be cool over there, but I'm not going to call him J-Dub. I'm going to call him Jalen John Williams or whatever the case may be. And I noticed that with all the teams, even our Pacers, I've never heard you call the Indiana Pacer players by their first names. You've always been professional. And that kind of gives, for me, a love of the balance you just talked about, professionalism. Is that on intentional, or was that by accident that you started doing that piece?
Well, as I said before, I made a conscious choice to broadcast game the way I want to hear it. And there's nothing more frustrating to me than turning on a broadcast, especially if I'm only a casual fan. Because if I'm a casual fan, I don't know all the players. And so hearing Johnny over to CC, over to Double T Whoopity, no, that doesn't work for me. And so I don't use nicknames at all. I do use the first names when mentioning a player, especially for the first time. Tyrese Halliburton is on the line. I will occasionally use the first names, but I rarely use them separate. I don't say Tyrese did this. I say Halliburton did this. And I don't call him Hallie like the fans do. I don't like nicknames. And back to the Jalen Williams thing, I'm never going to use a nickname for a guy from the other team, nor am I going to use the first name. You will never hear me say LeBron has the ball. It's James. When Kobe Bryant played, it was Bryant. Those aren't Pacer players. And I'm not going to refer to them by nickname because that's too familiar to me. If I'm a Pacer fan, it would annoy me if my broadcaster was saying J-Dub has it. J-Dub ain't our guy. And so he's Jalen Williams from Santa Clara or Jalen Williams from Arkansas. I will occasionally use the middle names. But again, it's a style point. Other guys do it just the opposite, and they're very successful, which just reinforces the point I'm already making in that there's not one way to do this. Johnny Most, who passed away a long time ago, did the Celtic games for decades, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and he was the biggest homer that ever lived. And to this day, he might be the most popular broadcaster that Boston ever had. So there's no one way to do it. You do it the way I do it is the way I want to hear it. If my employers don't like it, they'll say something to me, and maybe I can adjust. But in the end, I'm going to be judged on my performance. And if it's not good enough, at least in the opinion of the person or people hiring me, I want it to be not good enough, but I'm still happy with it. I can live with that. If I get fired, calling our players uh, whatever, Hallie and
Scooby Doo, Scooby Doo.
whatever, and then I'm going to look back and go, man, I got fired and I didn't even do it the way I thought it should be done. No, not acceptable to me.
I like that. Yeah. I do have more, but I'm gonna pass this on over to Ramon because I think we can follow back up for my favorite topic towards the end.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm well. How are you?
Pretty good. My question is going to be real simple. It's a hypothetical. I'm kind of like the fun guy of the group. All right, so I got a hypothetical. We got
Okay.
this year's team. No, we got a 3-team tournament. This year's team, the Malice in the Palace team, and the 2000 team that played the Lakers. Who would win?
Well, you forgot the team that, in my opinion, is the best one they've ever had here, which was the 97-98 team that lost to Chicago in the Eastern Conference Finals. That was the team I thought was the best. The team I thought was the most talented was the Brawl team, but they lacked professionalism, they lacked maturity. I've always maintained that while they were good enough to win a championship from a talent perspective, if it hadn't been the Brawl, it would have been something else that derailed them. They just weren't professional or mature enough. And when you're talking basketball at its highest level, there are so many little things that separate these teams. Oklahoma City, Indiana, New York, they're all really talented teams. What separates one from the other? It could be nuance. It could be the Pacers. I think you could make the case overachieved. If you believe that, why did they overachieve? It's because they played together, they enjoyed playing together, they left their egos at the door. They were the antithesis of the Brawl team. So if the three teams you're talking about were this one, the Brawl team, and the one that got to the finals, um, in order, talent-wise, there's no doubt in my mind the Brawl team was the best. But there's other factors. So if I can, and it's very hard to do because they're obviously not going to play each other. If they played in a 7-game series, I would take the 2000 team and then this year's team and then the Brawl team, even though I think the Brawl team was the most talented of the three.
I agree. I completely agree.
All right. I guess I'm back up next. Mark, I guess for my questions, or this question that I have for you. So I did radio for 3 years in high school, and then I've done basically TV but it's more of a live stream stuff at IU East for the last 3 years. But I feel like I've always kept the radio side of me. Every time someone brings the ball up the floor, it's always, score, time, and then, who's up or who's trailing. Why have you always preferred radio over television, just because you always listened to it growing up? And what about radio just kind of gives you that spark to do what you do?
Well, I got into it because I wanted to do play-by-play, and this might seem nuanced. I've
Mhm.
done TV. I didn't particularly enjoy it, and the reason is because there's no such thing as play-by-play on television. If you're doing play-by-play on television, you're doing it wrong. That's too descriptive, and it interrupts the flow. I, I I compare radio and television this way. Radio is an individual sport. TV is a team sport, and the lead broadcaster, let's use our guy, Chris Denary. He's not a play-by-play broadcaster. He is the lead broadcaster who is responsible for tying everything together. And that's a skill. It's not easy. I don't mean to suggest that TV is easier than radio. Quite the opposite. They're both challenging in different ways. But the reason I never really gravitated to television is I'm in it to do play-by-play, and I can't do that on TV because that's not the way that job should be done. And that's why I refer to Chris or Mike Breen or guys that have those jobs as lead broadcasters, whereas I refer to the guys in the seat that I have in radio as the play-by-play guy. I am the play-by-play guy for the Pacers. I'm the only one. Chris is the lead broadcaster for television. He's the only one. Those are two very different jobs. And if you do TV the way you do radio, you're doing it wrong. That's why I stayed on radio because I wanted to do play-by-play.
Interesting, interesting. And for me, when you were just talking about, there's different ways people do stuff and everything like that, I think it really caught my eye because I think it's a good point. Whether you're on TV, radio, everyone does it a different way. So when you listen to other people, do it in different ways, what is just some of the things you pick up? Is there anything, over the course of the year? Is there other broadcasters you've, admired or just taken good advice from and stuff like that?
Well, there's many I admire. Uh,
Mhm.
Way back to when I first started listening as a kid, I was lucky. I grew up in Minneapolis, and I think I would have gravitated to it anyway. But there were a couple of factors there. The guys that were doing the Twins, Herb Carneal and Ray Scott. Ray also did the Vikings for a while. The guy that was doing the North Stars, who are now the Dallas Stars, was a guy named Al Shaver. Those guys are all in the Hall of Fame in their sports. And so I grew up listening to top shelf broadcasters, and that made an impression on me. My dad was also in the business. And so he would spend time taking me to his job on occasion. And he was very frank and candid about how difficult the profession was. He didn't try to discourage me. And once I decided I was going to do it, he did encourage me. But he made it clear, and this is no different now, even though the landscape is different. When I was coming up, it was TV or radio. That was it. Now there's all these different platforms that you can gravitate to. There's podcasts, there's streaming, there's a whole bunch of opportunities that didn't exist when I was coming up through the ranks. But back then it was radio and TV, and in those days, you couldn't make a living unless you got to a certain level. You could have fun. I made $500 a month at my first job, and I enjoyed every second of it. But I was young and single. And a lot of guys in our profession start families at young ages, and they're still not making money. And now they lose the flexibility of going, you know what? I don't mind living paycheck to paycheck. I'm chasing my dream. They have to, if they haven't gotten there yet, say, you know what? I can't support my family doing this anymore. I have to get a real job. And so it's difficult and it's challenging. But I always was determined, and I was single in all those early jobs. And so I could pack up at a moment's notice and leave. I didn't have to take my kids out of school or any of that. And that makes it a little bit easier to move. But you do have to get to a certain level to make a living because these jobs generally don't pay until you get to a certain level. And so that's part of the challenge of the industry. But I was lucky. I had some good jobs early and I was single. And so none of that came into play for me.
Gotcha. And I've got one more question, and then I'll pass it back over to Darrell. You've called a lot of sports, and obviously the announcers that you named that you looked up to. You said hockey, football. When you look at the sports that you favored, what were your favorite sports to broadcast? So I think for me, I watch football all the time, but I prefer calling volleyball over football. But basketball has always been my number one. So how would you rank the sports you've broadcasted over the years?
Well, I have done what I would call the four major sports: baseball, football, basketball, and hockey. I've done all of them.
Okay.
I have not done volleyball. I have not done lacrosse or some of these
Hmm.
sports that are now becoming increasingly popular. I did a couple of years of indoor soccer,
There you
uh,
go.
which is, as far as I know, no longer around. This was way back in the day.
Hmm.
Um, I enjoy them all, but I got in it because I wanted to do baseball. Baseball is so challenging with all of the dead time and the opportunity to develop storylines and talk about players. But my opportunities didn't come in baseball. And I'm not going to say, I'm in the NBA and I'm not even 30. I'm not going to go, nope, nope, it's not baseball. Sorry. I was very lucky to get these kinds of opportunities. But I did, at least temporarily, scratch that itch. In 2005, I spent 8 weeks in Billings, Montana doing rookie league ball, which doesn't even exist anymore.
Hmm.
And then I spent the summer of 2015 out on Cape Cod doing college summer league ball and working with college interns and helping them get their careers started. And so I have gotten a baseball fix from time to time, but baseball is my favorite. I think in large part because it's the most challenging, at least in my opinion.
Hmm.
A lot of people who don't follow hockey say, boy, that hockey must be hard. Well, it's no more difficult than basketball. It's the same sport, five guys going up and down trying to score. Now, the rules are different, and hockey changes players out on the fly, so you have to know them cold. In basketball, they can't check into the game unless the ball's dead. So if I forgot or didn't know who this guy was, and this happened to me early in my career when I was doing high school tournaments, and we'd do 4 games in one day with 8 teams that I'd never seen before, and there was no internet to help you prepare. So I would have to look down at my sheet and who is that guy? In hockey, you don't have time to do that because by the time you look, the puck has gone from guy A to guy B and over to guy C, and maybe it's in the net. So I found football to be the easiest just because it follows a pattern. Snap, play, dead. Snap, play, dead.
Hmm.
Now, the plays are different. And when I occasionally watch football now, I see that there's terminology. I have no idea what they're talking about. So if I were to do football now, I'd have to bone up again.
Yeah.
It has a repetitive nature that makes it pretty easy to call. Basketball and hockey, I would consider about equal in terms of difficulty. Baseball, to me, has always been the most challenging.
Interesting. And I did a small amount of baseball in high school. I did football in high school, but we don't have a football team at IUE. So I mean, I've done basketball every year since I've joined, been broadcasting, and then volleyball I just started in. But I think basketball's always been the sport for me. So it's really interesting to hear the other sports you called, especially hockey, because I've never done hockey. Darrell, I'm going to give it back over to you and let you get a couple more questions in.
So, Mark, we were talking about stadiums and we were talking about the love we have for Gainbridge. I've got a note down here. My least favorite NBA stadium is the FedEx Forum. What's your least favorite stadium from maybe from the perspective of, to your point, it looks old, run down, not well manicured, or also fan friendly? How people treat you when they realize that you're a Pacer member of the Pacers organization.
Well, I'm not really qualified to talk about some of these arenas because there are literally buildings I've never seen the concourse. We come in down through the bottom, and there's no reason for me to go out there. And
Right.
so I rarely do. I tend to evaluate these buildings based on our working conditions. So for me, the worst one is Boston because it's our worst sight lines. New York is right behind it. Although New York is maybe the coolest place from an environment standpoint. It's an old, not rickety, they've remodeled it, but it's an old, tired building. There's nothing special about it.
Yeah.
But once the game starts, there is something special about it. It's New York. There's celebrities there. If the Knicks are good, there's a certain vibe in the air. The building itself, though, is nothing to write home about. Now, we went for the first time to the Clippers' new building last season, which has several innovative concepts in play. But I just don't really get a chance to see some of the things fans see because I'm not in the concourse. I don't come in through the main entrance. And as far as fans treating us, I can't recall ever being hostilely treated ever by any fans in any building.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. That's because the folks in Memphis, while the stadium's not the best, the concourse, they've been probably treating me the nicest of any of the stadiums I've been in. Those all in the East Coast area. But Memphis, for whatever reason, they've got a lot of challenges in that city. But in that stadium, the people are really nice.
I will say this, and it's maybe because we were there so long, because of the playoff series. The people, not just the fans, but the people on the streets, the people in the hotel we stayed in, the people in Oklahoma City were really hospitable and very nice people. And we had fans outside the bus as we got set to go to the arena who were, booing us. But it's not like in New York when they were standing on the other side of the street cursing us. The East Coast is a bit different. But the people in Oklahoma City were very nice. It was like two small towns playing in a high school tournament in that there was no hostility between the fans. Now, there was a competitive fire with the players, of course, but that's true no matter who's playing. But the people in Oklahoma City were really, really very, very nice and very hospitable.
So I've heard you speak about this, for quite a few years, but I'm going to ask for the show. What would you change about the league if you were the czar of the NBA? I think it's probably changed a little bit over the last few years. But if you were the czar of the NBA, what would you change and why?
It's changed a lot. And if you go back to the 90s when the Pacers first started getting good, the league was very physical, perhaps too physical. Now it's not physical enough. I'd like to see some hybrid of what we're watching now and what we watched then. I'm not one of these that says there's too many three-point shots, but there is something to be said if your team made 7 in a game, that was a lot. It made them more special. I can't imagine if Slick were still here calling these games. He'd be hoarse by the third quarter with all the boom babies. So I would try to find a hybrid there. And then the only other thing I would do, I might tweak some of the rules maybe, but I'd have to think about it. The only thing I would do is I would totally eliminate the replay. It's a waste. It delays the game. If you'll recall, when they put it in, it was well intended, and they only used it to determine if shots at the end of quarters were released in time. That I could live with. But now, as they become the replays I'm talking about, more and more invasive and more prevalent, they were originally intended to overturn egregious calls. Well, egregious by definition should be something that I can look at one time and go, oh my God, we got it wrong. Not 18 times over 4 minutes and then no.
Yeah.
It's intrusive. I don't care for it. I wouldn't mind leaving it in if we used it the same way we used it when they brought it in, which was we're only using it to see if the shots were released at the end of quarters. That I could live with. But if they are going to keep it, which clearly they are, then I think you should be limited to 1 a game, not 2. And if you get that one right, you get it. In other words, you can have 100 if you get everyone right. You get 1. And if it's wrong, then you're done. But you get 1. And if you are correct, then you get another one, and so on. So I would change it from 2 to 1. And then within that framework, you can keep having more if you get them right.
Okay.
Hey, Darrell, I just wanted to ask real quick to add on to that. Do you like the coaches' challenges that they added a couple years ago?
No.
No? Okay. Gotcha.
Although within the framework of
I was just curious, yeah.
Within the framework of what I'm talking about, we're talking semantics here. If you get 1 timeout,
Mm-hmm.
1 challenge, the coach is going to be the one that decides. So
Yeah.
in essence, it would be a coach's challenge. I want to get
okay, gotcha.
all of it though. But if you had 1, the guy at the end of the bench isn't going to go, hey, Rick, I didn't like that. I'm challenging. No, it's the coach who will challenge. And I'm surprised some of these players don't have wrist injuries now with this. Just stop it. To me, that should be a technical foul. Anytime you do this, bang.
All right, Darrell, you can go. I just was curious because he was talking about that, and I was like, I wonder if he kind of meant like the coach's challenge was a part of that whole monologue or whatnot. But Darrell, you can go ahead.
And to that point, right? If I remember, Mark, you can correct me. I think Trent Tucker created the
Oh,
replay
he
because
didn't
that shot
create it, but
was
he
that
was
in
involved.
Madison Square.
He was involved in a play, uh, and they changed the rules. So now
Yeah,
you cannot get off a shot, a catch and shoot, unless
point
there are
blank.
3/10 of a second or more left. Anything under that, you have to throw it to the rim
Yeah,
and try to dunk it or tip it. But he was. Oh, this has to be back in the 80s. The
yeah,
replay come in right after this, but they did change that rule with 3/10 of a second being the threshold for a catch and shoot. Um, but he was involved in a game where he caught the ball with, I don't remember how much time left, but
point two. I think. I
he
think it was
faked
point
and then
two.
he turned around and then he shot. It was obviously late. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's a good rule because it takes the onus off of the officials to decide whether, although you'd have the mandatory replay anyway, because shots at the end of quarters are automatically reviewed anyway, so it's not in the officials' hands. But at least now teams know that, okay, if there's 2/10 of a second left, I can't throw it in because we can't catch it and shoot it. We have to throw it to the rim and hope somebody can, slam it.
yeah, yeah.
So that was Trent Tucker. And if I were to guess when it was, I think it might have been even mid 80s, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah, yep. It was. I remember. So every time I see point three, I think about Trent Tucker for some
Mhm.
reason, for whatever reason. So I'm gonna say my best for last, but I've got one more. I'm gonna let the guys go back around. I want to get your take on the Miles Turner decision. I've been pretty vocal about me wanting him to stay. A lot of criticism has gone Miles' way for the last 10 years. And I think that Miles is a good person. He represented the city very well. He has his limitations, but I didn't see it publicly. There was nothing that came out publicly that he disrespected the franchise, himself, or his family. And I was disappointed the Pacers and Miles didn't have an opportunity to meet in the middle ground. And I also said that down the road, Miles and the Pacers may look back and say, we should have made it work. That's my thought. I want to get your take on that.
They did make it work for 10 years.
Well, post that. Well, I'm saying it was a great 10 years, in my opinion.
The way I look at it is this. If he thinks that's best for Miles and his family, that's good enough for me. That's how we all make our decisions.
Yep.
If you live next door to me and I'm your friend and we work together and then you decide to go work at a competitor because it's better for you, I'm not going to hate on you. And I get that fans are emotional. I understand that, and I'm not even being critical of that. But to me, it's a simple formula. The man decided he was better off somewhere else. Now, time will tell if he made the right choice, but it's his choice to make. He played out his contract. He didn't get an extension. He took his chances. What if he blew out a knee in the playoffs? Then where would he be? So I think he took some risk to do this and put himself in a position where he could call his own play, and that's what he chose to do. And I say more power to him because the 10 years he was here, he represented himself, the franchise, and his family in a first-class manner. He was always kind to the fans, who were not, by the way, always kind to him. And
True.
so, he did what he was supposed to do when he was here, and he followed the rules in terms of the collective bargaining agreement and earned himself an opportunity to decide what he wanted to do, and he chose to go to Milwaukee, and I don't have any problem with that at all.
Yeah. Same here. I've gotten over the shock of it, but I'm ready for the next season to come and see what brings with Isaiah Jackson and those guys and see what they can do with having extended opportunities. But I'm going to save my best for last, but I'm going to let Ramon and Isaiah take on. So I think you probably know what direction I'm going to go when I get my turn again.
Ramon, you're up.
I got a small question. There's a big question, I guess. I enjoy and love talking to individuals who enjoy and love what they do. All right, because I coach football. I'm an assistant athletic director at a high school. I love it. It is. I wake up and enjoy what I do, and I go to bed and enjoy what I do, and we can see that in you. The question I always have, and I ask myself the same question: if I wasn't doing this, what would I be doing? Mr. Boyle, if you wasn't doing what you were doing, what would you be doing next? What else would you do?
Well, I will answer that, but first I want to address something you just said. When I started my career when I was 19 years old, and I loved it from day one. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s, because I was so obsessed with my own career and what I was doing, that I looked around and realized, hey, not everyone loves what they're doing. I didn't know that. And then as I got older, I saw that very few people loved what they were doing. And so I feel grateful that I've been able to make a living doing something that I have a passion for. The people that I really admire are the people that get up every day and go to work and bust their ass at jobs they hate. Those are the people that deserve respect. That is not easy to do. I work hard, and I'm sure you do too, but it's not work. Uh, it's a passion and it's a joy. Now, I do work hard, but I never feel like I'm working, if you get what I'm saying. Those people are working hard and they're working to put food on the table. It's a testament to a man or a woman's character when they go out there and give you their best effort when they don't like it. So I admire that. The only other profession I considered, I thought about going into the law because I thought it would be so challenging. I wanted to be a defense attorney. I thought it would be so challenging to see if I could use my skills and knowledge to get people their freedom. I'm not going to say this is the only reason I didn't do it, but one of the aspects of broadcasting that appealed to me more than the law was, and I'm a huge advocate of education. I think everybody should get as much education as they can. But let's face reality. There's no real reason that you should have to go to college for 4 years to learn how to be a broadcaster. That's ridiculous. You learn 95% of what you need to know after you're on the job. It's almost like a conspiracy. You got to go 4 years. Well, I didn't go at all. Um, but the law is different because there's such nuance and there's so much knowledge you have to grasp.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the criteria is now, but back when I was thinking about it, you had to go to school for 7 or 8 years. And I don't have that kind of patience. And so I was able to talk my way into a job when I was 19, and I never looked back. But from time to time, I do wonder if I would have been any good at it. Curiosity. I'll never know because I'm not going to go to law school anytime soon. But that's the only other profession I really thought about.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I like the answer.
No,
Good question. Thank you.
you that I think when I got to at least my freshman year, I was probably thinking the same thing. Was like, I learned a lot in my high school years because I was fortunate enough to broadcast at Warren and do radio for 3 years. And I think when I got there my first year, I was like, man, I don't feel like I should be here. But I think over time, it helped me build up more reps. And I think the college experience, I think that's why, people say to go to college.
Well,
Uh,
let me interrupt you there because
Go ahead.
when I say you don't need to go to college for 4 years to learn how to be a broadcaster, I'm not saying that those 4 years aren't valuable because something I
Yeah.
didn't take into account was while I'm out here at 19 years old competing with grown men who were twice as old as me, and I'm on my own for the first time, and I'm in a city that I don't know anything about. The college experience isn't just about learning a profession, and I don't mean to sound like I'm lecturing because you guys already know this. It's about learning how to manage your time, learning social skills, learning things that you need to do whatever. You
Mhm.
learn a lot of things in college that have nothing to do with broadcasting, but a lot to do with being an adult and managing your time and all of that other stuff. So if I came off as suggesting the 4 years aren't valuable, they certainly are. But from a narrow-minded perspective, there's no way you need to go 4 years to learn how to broadcast.
No, I would agree with you, and I agree with the sense of when I first got there, I felt the same way, but and then I realized, it helped me, be more professional, whether it was talking to
Yeah.
coaches, talking to media personnel, I don't think I could have done
Plus,
this.
plus, Isaiah, the difference is this. While you were making your mistakes in college classrooms, I was making them in the real world. And
Yeah.
you have a safety net at college.
Mhm.
There just is. You're with your peers. No one's going to judge you as a 19-year-old college sophomore for making a stupid mistake. But as a 19-year-old who's getting paid not to make those mistakes and making them in the real world, and now you got a boss who's all over you. Yes, it's
Yeah.
that progression of learning stuff in college that has nothing to do with your profession, very valuable.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I was just about to say, I don't think I could have done this podcast and gotten the guests we've had without going through these years of college, the ups and the downs, and the people that have helped me, get to the point where I'm at now. The question that I had was going back to kind of just the Pacers in the NBA as a whole. You've called a lot of great Pacer teams, but was there any teams on the opposing side that you were excited to call for, maybe after an off season or after a trade or just heading into the new season? Was there any teams where you were a little more excited to broadcast for, just have them come to Indiana or travel to see them as well?
No,
No?
uh, no. This is going to sound
I, I was curious. Go ahead.
sort of weird. The older I get, the less interested I am in sports.
Okay.
Uh, and now I look at these teams and they're coming in, and I'm curious to see the new players.
Hmm.
For example, in recent years, when Wembanyama came in, I wanted to see him play, but I wasn't like losing sleep at night in anticipation. To me, they're just part of that night's scenery that I have to talk about.
Hmm.
Uh, it's not that I don't like sports, I do. If there's a baseball game or a football game on, I'll watch it. But I almost the only sports I watch in my house are NBA games because I need to know about the NBA. And even then, I don't watch them live. I watch them the next day so I can get the replay and cut out the commercials and save a half an hour. If a football game, if somebody says, "Hey, you want to go have a beer and watch football?" Yeah, sure. But I
Hmm.
can name two players on the Colts. The other day, I was sitting in a bar watching baseball with the sound down, and they listed the top six ERAs in the National League. I never heard of any of these guys. I don't follow the sports per se, but I like the sports themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I like to watch the sport. I don't have a rooting interest. My brain works in a really bizarre way. When I was about 15 or 16, I was an avid fan, and I grew up in Minneapolis, so I followed the Twins and the Vikings and so on. But my brain works on a very logical plane, and there was a time in my teenage years where it occurred to me, and if you ever heard the Jerry Seinfeld bit about rooting for laundry, you'll know what I'm talking about. I don't know any of these people. Why do I care what happens to them? And the reality is I don't. And that's why I watch NBA games with interest because I know people on every one of these teams, whether they're players, coaches, broadcasters, front office types, and I like some of them more than others, and I want them to succeed. But I don't know anybody in the NHL anymore. It's been, 40 years since I worked in that league or close to it.
Hmm.
And so I just can't get and believe me, I'm grateful for fans that can. The Seinfeld bit, if I can, I can't do it, obviously, but to paraphrase, it's you root for guy A when he's on your team, but when he goes to the other team, you don't like him. And the guy from guy B comes to your team and now you love him. You're rooting for laundry. You're rooting for the uniforms they're wearing. And he does it in a far more humorous way than I do. But I just, as a young man, I lost interest because, not interest, I still like the sports and I
Hmm.
still watch them if they're on. But I don't care who wins because I don't know the people. And I can't get emotionally attached to people I don't know. But I'm glad people can because if they couldn't, I wouldn't have a job.
You know what? That's fair enough. When you look at broadcasting as a whole, right? You said it's evolved over time, and there's so many different outlets. Do you feel media uh, is where do you see it as? Is it in the right place? Is it in the wrong place? I think everyone has their opinion on how sports media is evolving and changing. For better or for worse. What is your overall perspective of the business right now, where it feels like we're in this time of change with streaming services and everything else where you can watch sports and
Yeah, I
people's
can't
opinions?
I can't knowledgeably comment because I don't mean this literally, but
Hmm.
most literally, I don't listen to sports radio. I don't watch ESPN unless there's a game on that I need to see. And so I know of these talk shows, and I personally know some of the guys that are doing them,
Hmm.
but and I hear how it's become personality driven and all that it's about clicks and all of that. And if you say so, but I don't know because I don't watch or listen. When I get in my car, I listen to old time radio shows from the 50s, or I turn on music. I don't hey, who's on ESPN? What are they talking about? What did they think of last night's Bears Cardinals game? I don't care. So I hear what you're asking, and I hear people critiquing the industry now. And like anything else, people who don't think much of it speak with a louder voice than those that think it's cool. So you tend to hear the negative more than the positive. But all I know for sure is that there's more platforms for young broadcasters to get involved in than there were when I started, and I think that's a good thing.
Awesome, awesome. I love it, Darrell. You're up next. Go ahead with your slate of questions.
So I want to get to the fun part, the really, really fun part. So I know who your favorite color partner was. I want to know who is the second most comfortable partner you've had. You've had, I think, Pollard. You've had Austin. You got Eddie. Just want to get your thought on who have you had the most synergy with beyond number one. I won't say number one's name yet because I got a host of questions for number one.
Well, let's just say his name. It's Slick Leonard.
Absolutely.
And I might be forgetting somebody here, but I will tell you the guys I worked with. When I came here, I worked with Clark Kellogg.
Yeah.
And then he went over to television. I worked alone for several years. And then in the playoffs, they would give me an analyst. So I worked with George McGinnis, Billy Keller, Jerry Seasting. Slick stepped in a time or two. I might be forgetting somebody. And then after
Darnell Hillman,
no, I never worked with Darnell.
On TV.
He worked with us. He was in our community relations department for many years. And then after Slick started to have health issues, and we would use guys to fill in. I did some games with Quinn Buckner. I did some games with Scott Pollard, with Austin Crozier. Stephanie White did some games with me. Eddie Gill. So there's a long list. And Eddie's our current partner, and I'm not saying this just because he's the current guy. I like working with all of them. But Eddie is a natural. He just gets it. He knows when to talk. He knows how to be succinct. He's knowledgeable. He follows the game. He can offer, and this is to me critical for an analyst. If he can't offer something that I can't, then what is he there for? He played, Slick coached. All these other guys played or coached or did both. So they see the game differently than I do, and they have a different perspective, and it's important to share with our listener. Now, Slick was, I would say this, if we're talking technical, he was probably the worst broadcaster of all of those guys. But he was the most popular because he was entertaining, he was engaging, he always shared his emotions. It was the thrill of a lifetime to work with him, even though ironically, he was probably the worst broadcaster of the whole group.
It reminds me a couple times, probably this would have been the down years when we had, this was after the brawl around 06, 07, 08. And there were times I remember you having to nudge him to do a boom baby. And this wasn't once or twice. I remember in a season, maybe double digits. What did you think when those things happen? Come on, Slick.
See, it's Slick being Slick. Nothing, by the time we'd work together, we ended up working together. Well, we worked a couple playoff series back before he was my permanent partner. And then we worked together from 94, 95 until he passed 3 years ago. So that's, almost 30 years. And after a little while, it became obvious that he was unique. And he was the only guy that I made an exception for in this regard. When I get a new guy, especially if he's not done it before, I tell them this. Here's how we do this. I'm not going to overwhelm you with anything. We have one rule to start, and it's this. When I talk, you don't. I might ask you a question or I might not, but if you have something to say and I'm not talking, then jump in. And then after that, we get a feel for how we work together, and then I might offer some constructive criticism or some advice. But I like to keep it simple at the beginning because it can be overwhelming to do something you've never done before, especially at this level. This is the NBA. This isn't the local high school team, and the only people listening are Johnny's parents. It's different, and so it can be overwhelming. But it's Slick. Nothing surprised me. I remember the first time. The reason they put us together permanently in 94, 95 is because in 94 we went to the playoffs, and the same as the other years, I worked alone during the season. They gave me Slick. Well, the Pacers made a run to Game 7 of the conference finals, and they liked the way we sounded together. But he's just a different character. One of the things that he had over the years developed, he knew all the nooks and crannies in these buildings, so he knew where he could go hide and have a cigarette. So at the end of the third quarter of Game 7 in the 94 conference finals, the Pacers-Knicks, the game was decided in the final 2 minutes. It was very close. And it was nerve-wracking. So Slick said he couldn't take it anymore. He'd be right back. And he went to have a cigarette, and he didn't come back till there was 2 minutes left in the game. There's a million stories like that because he's a one of a kind.
Yeah.
And you could make the case that there's a whole generation of fans that only remember him as a broadcaster, not as a high school player or a national champion at IU or an NBA player or an ABA coach. There's a whole generation of people that they might be vaguely aware of it, but they know Slick as a broadcaster. But he and Nancy, they were married over 60 years by the time he passed, and Nancy still comes to games. She's 93 years old, sits behind the bench. You could make the case that Slick is the most influential figure in the history of Indianapolis. If they didn't save the Pacers with the marathon, would the Colts be here? Would downtown be vibrant? You don't know.
It's funny you say that because we would do post-game calls on this line, and I spoke about that with Slick and Nancy saving. I was a young kid then, but I remember my dad saying, "I'm going to give what I can." He worked at General Motors, and we would see the games at the fairgrounds, and he had a big coffee can, and I would cut grass and things like that, and we saved that money for the Pacers.
Wow.
So you're right to that point, and I want to say this because I was going to save it, but I'll say this one now, and then I'll go some more. I think they're doing an injustice if they do any statue of any Pacer prior to they do Slick. Yes, I'm biased. He represented, what's good about the Pacers and the city of Indianapolis. I just hope that the ownership group and the Pacers organization does something, either naming the floor. I think I tweeted at you a few times about naming the floor or doing something to have those youngsters who don't know about Slick beyond the coach, beyond the broadcaster, the coach, the player, the IU champion. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not a fan of statues for a practical reason. Let's say I put a statue of person A on my concourse, and then person A gets arrested for a felony. If I were going to do statues, my rule would be if I owned a franchise, I'm willing to listen. You could convince me, but whoever we're honoring has to be dead. I can't put a statue up of somebody who might embarrass me once that statue's up. That would be my criteria.
That's fair. That's fair.
Slick has passed, so he qualifies.
You're right.
And beyond that, the only other person I could think of that I would put a statue up for would be Reggie, and he's got a mural on that building downtown. That's enough for him. I think that's good. But who else would you think of besides Slick?
The three that I love are Mel, Big Mac, Slick.
Yeah, well, they're already in the rafters, and so
right. But you know what I'm saying? From a physical perspective.
No,
you're right. I mean, I think
they're all worthy. They're all worthy. And they're not all passed, but Mel and Roger have passed, Slick has passed, so they would meet my criteria.
George has
passed. Yeah, so they would meet my criteria. And I know that sounds kind of harsh. I'm not putting a statue up because in case you go to prison, then I'm going to take it down.
Bad things can happen.
Yeah, so it's more of a practical concern than anything else because it would rarely happen. Why risk it?
Don't take the chance.
Yeah.
So here's my big one, right? Well, I have a lot of big ones about Slick. Slick had an affinity for Al Harrington. I told the guys about this.
He did.
So when I would listen to the broadcast after the games, the only guy that Slick stayed for after the broadcast that I've heard was Al Harrington. Can you remember any other player that Slick would stay after and spend time with?
I defer to you on that. I don't remember him staying for Al. If you say he did, then he did. Yeah. But I don't remember that. So since I don't even remember that, I wouldn't hazard a guess if he stayed for anyone else. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't.
He called him Slick Daddy. For some reason, he called him Slick Daddy.
Yeah, well, they were close. Al came to us when he was 19 years old.
Yeah.
And he lived in his rookie year. He lived with Antonio Davis.
Yeah.
Antonio kind of mentored him.
Yeah.
And then, Al had a very, very good NBA career. And now he's a wildly successful businessman.
Yeah.
Out on the West Coast. So, Slick was one of his Pacer mentors when he came into the league.
Do you know why? I mean, because he had an opportunity. Think about at that time, Reggie was our big king of the castle. And I just don't, it wasn't even close. Al was by head and shoulders, it seemed like, publicly and then radio wise, that he was Slick's guy.
You'd have to ask Al. I don't know why. Why do two people anywhere gravitate toward one another? There could be a
Yeah.
million different reasons. But what you're saying is true. But I don't know why it's true.
Yeah.
It is true though.
Definitely different for sure. The other thing, Slick, I was messing with the guys during the playoff series about the referees' numbers adding up to 100. Can you tell the story in Slick verbiage why that was important to him?
He never said why. He just said that it was. He would take the three numbers on the back of the officials' jerseys, and first of all, no officiating met Slick's approval anyway. But to the extent that they had a chance, if the three numbers on the back of the jerseys added up to 100, then you had a chance. But it's a flawed theory because a lot of the older officials have single-digit numbers, and a lot of the older guys are the better officials. So it just didn't make any sense. But that was his thing. And then it didn't even matter if it added up to 100 or 40 or 60. He found a reason to criticize them all at some point anyway. So it just didn't matter because that was one of the appeals. And I think one of the reasons we worked so well together is because Slick was very emotionally invested, where I was the straight man. To use an example, it's apples and oranges, and it's dated, but I'm old enough to remember the end of it. It's like Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin. Slick was Jerry Lewis, and I was Dean Martin. Jerry got all the laughs, and Dean, took the hits, and Slick was not. He wanted the Pacers to win, but he'd get emotionally going in the other direction too. He would get disgusted with the Pacers, and he would be very harsh and critical. And to me, that was even better because it was so amusing. Because he wanted them to win more than anybody. And when they played poorly or made mental errors, oh, that would drive him nuts. And he was not shy about saying it.
It reminds me of the game. I think we were playing the Houston Rockets in Marcus Square Arena. It was a call on Reggie for an offensive foul. And I remember Slick was on the call with you. And the fans started throwing just trash on the floor. It was a big, big deal. Do you remember that?
No.
Because Slick made a big he I hate this Pacer history, but he was really upset about the Pacers and how they handled themselves.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about complaining to the officials. He said something along the lines of "Let it go, let me do the complaining," because he was a coach, and that was his play.
No, I don't remember that, but that sounds like something he would say for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last one for me, the Orlando player. I can't remember his name. I hear it to this day, and I even asked you about it on Twitter. Mark, does that guy have a hat on down there?
Yeah, that was Elfrid Payton.
Yes.
When he came into the league, he had this rather unique hairstyle.
Yes.
It kind of looked like a wave in the ocean. It came out way past his forehead. And so they're lined up for the opening tip. And Slick said, he called me Marky sometimes. Marky, that Payton, he wearing a hat? I said, no, Slick, you can't wear hats. And he said, I could swear he's wearing a hat. Yeah. And ironically, now Elfrid Payton was with the Mad Ants last year. And so he was on rehab. And so he was in the practice facility. And I thought about telling him that story, but I didn't know him. And so I just never got around to doing it. But he showed up in the practice facility one day because he was with the Mad Ants and he was rehabbing an injury. And I thought I should tell him, but I never did.
That would have been classic. That would have been a great story to tell to a lot of people. But no, it's good. So I'm hogging the time now.
No, you're good, Darrell. I told you like before the interview, I'm like, man, if Matt Taylor last week was for me, this one was like definitely for you. So you're all good.
So more towards Mark. We've got some friends that are bourbon and cigar drinkers, bourbon drinkers and cigar smokers. I need the names of your favorite cigar and your favorite bourbon so I can share with my guys.
I don't have a favorite, but I can tell you the cigars and bourbons that are on my short list.
Okay.
I love Cohibas. I love Christoph. Davidoffs are good. Those would probably be my three favorites. So Padrones, very good. Bourbon. There's so many good ones. I like Blanton's, Angel's Envy, Woodford, Knob Creek. There's a long list of bourbons that I enjoy. But I will give you this tip. If you're going out into a bar to have bourbon, see, here's my thing about money. I don't mind spending it, but I hate wasting it. So to me, there's one bourbon. Now, you might find others that are better. I'm not saying that, but it's good. And you'll never beat it at the price point in a bar. So I always order it because it's really good and it's the best buy. So go with Buffalo Trace.
Gotcha. I've seen the commercials.
Yeah. So, but it's like anything else. It's all a matter of preference. Like you might try different bourbons and like them or different cigars. This is not cast in stone. I'm just telling you what I like.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay. I just know we've got some friends that love both, and I said to them, I'm gonna make sure that I ask Mark those questions. What were his go-tos? And then my last one. This is the most serious one. I want to hear you talk about how your dad molded you. I've seen a little bit about how stoic he was towards things and the emotion piece. Can you speak a little bit about your dad? How you followed him as a broadcaster? Obviously, his first time with Dick Vitale, and give the audience a little bit of insight behind the best radio guy in the NBA right now, besides just the play-by-play.
Well, my dad was, I think, typical of his generation. We knew, I have a brother and a sister. We knew that he loved us, but he never told us. And you were expected to achieve at a high level. And I was a really good student and good enough that I could play sports as a youngster. But no matter what, if I went 1 for 4, he would talk about the 2 times I grounded out and the 1 time I struck out. It wasn't until I got to be older that I appreciated my parents. I knew they loved me and all that, but my dad, without saying so, instilled this in me. And it wasn't until my 30s that I really was able to take advantage. But no matter how, and he never said this to me, but the way he raised me, I know this is what he thought. No matter how good you are, you can always be better. Don't be satisfied. And to this day, I do not believe that you stay the same. You're either better or you're worse. And I don't want to get worse. And that's why I don't stop working. And I was I'm still self-critical, but I was so self-critical well into my career. It wasn't until many years into my career that I was able to enjoy my success while still striving to be better. For a while, it was just striving to be better. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And then I got to the point where, you know what? You're doing pretty well. Enjoy that, but don't rest on it. That's how my dad raised me. And as far as getting into broadcasting, man, he was really honest about it. He didn't discourage me or encourage me, but he made sure that I knew what a difficult profession it was, that I knew how transient it was, that I knew, as I said earlier, you had to get to a certain level to make any money. And he was very frank about it, and he shared all of that with me. And I know he had paid some dues on the way up. But by the time I was old enough to remember, he had already established himself in Minneapolis. And so he was done with the Fargos and the Decimal Point Louisianas and all these places I've been. But he never, to the day he died, he never offered any praise. And I'll give you a primary example. By now, I'd been in the NBA for a number of years. My dad was retired. He lived in Phoenix. So we were playing in Phoenix, and I said, you know what? You've never done this. Why don't you come to the game and sit in with us on the broadcast? Not participate, just listen, see how we do it, because I would like to show you. Okay, he said, great. So he sat in with us, and he listened to the whole broadcast, sat courtside with us. And at the end, I said, so what'd you think? And he said, not bad, which by his standards was high praise. So years go by, he passes away. My sister says to me one day, remember that time that Dad sat in with you in Phoenix? I said, yeah, of course. She said, did he ever tell you what he thought of your work? I said, yeah. He said it wasn't bad. And she said, well, he told me Mark's better than I ever was.
Wow.
It makes me cry now.
How many tears? Wow. How many tears?
He couldn't tell me that.
Wow.
My sister. But that's how men of his era went about their business.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I apologize. guys. So Mark, back in the winter, I think 2 years, maybe 3 years prior to Slick passing away, he fell in the winter. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he broke his collarbone. Can you tell the story about when he hurt himself and talk about, because it speaks about how tough Slick was.
Well,
And, and
I wasn't there. He slipped on some ice. Uh,
Mhm.
and I don't even remember, Darrell, the specific injury. If you say it was a collarbone, my memory is that it was a broken arm, but it doesn't
something
matter.
like that, something like that. Yeah,
He didn't miss any time.
yeah.
By then, he wasn't traveling with us anyway because he'd had heart attacks and
Yeah.
all of that. But he still showed up at every home game, um, and he was there. He's old school. Guys from that era.
Yeah.
I shudder to think what he'd think of today's players. Rest, will not play, rest. That would have driven him crazy. Because in his day, there were 10 guys on a team. There were 8 teams, so there were 80 guys. And so the jobs were hard to get. None of the contracts were guaranteed. And so you had to, if you got hurt, you were going to lose your job. And he used to tell stories about how they'd go on the road, they had to wash their own uniforms in the sink. And, it was a whole different time.
Yeah.
And so he respected the modern day player and thought the world of the guys that we had with the Pacers. But every once in a while, he'd make a comment about, he ain't tough enough. Well, in Slick's eyes, nobody was tough enough. So, yeah, and that was before we had teams sitting guys down just to rest them. That didn't exist back in the day. You had to have an injury to sit out.
Yeah.
But now it's rest. Will not play, head cold. What?
Finger.
Yeah, Slick would have said no, no, no. Yeah, but different times. I'm not criticizing today's players. It's just a different standard.
Yeah.
Again, I'm done with my question. Again, sorry for taking over, guys. This is a one of a kind, being a Pacer homer. I just had to make sure I got my stuff out there, because I think it's important that those stories get shared, Mark, because oftentimes they don't. Those things get lost
Sure.
over the years, and it's important to bring those things back. And me being the guy I won't let the Pacer stuff die out. That's the best emblem ever right there behind me.
I appreciate that, Darrell. Thanks.
And all I do is watch sports documentaries, right? Because I was born in 2004. A lot of the stuff that you guys talked about, I've watched on video, and then there's some stuff I haven't even got to hear.
Sure.
So to hear those stories is awesome. Ramon, I'm going to throw it over to you, and then I've got maybe 2 more questions. But Ramon, I want to give it over to you if you got anything, of course.
I don't have any more questions.
What'd you think of all those stories?
I've heard God talk about these stories forever.
He's not 20 like you.
And they're true. The stories are true. They're not fabrications. They're true, I promise.
So Mark, I guess what I'll ask, and it's probably, this is my one question I have heading into this coming season, right? With no Tyrese, we talked about it a couple weeks ago on the pod with Nembhard.
No Halliburton. No Halliburton.
Yeah, what did I say?
Tyrese.
No Halliburton. I'm sorry. Heading into the season with Cotherin and Nembhard. When you look at both of those guys, I said it a couple weeks ago on the pod. I think one of them could break out and maybe make an all-star team. Obviously, do you have any thoughts on both of them? I know, we've talked about Cotherin on the pod, and he's had his ups and downs with the team, and Nembhard, he's made tremendous growth over the last couple of years. Where do you see these two in their roles heading into this season? Because obviously they'll take more of the offensive load with Halliburton being out.
Well, assuming they're both here, the summer still has a ways to go.
Yeah.
And I don't have any inside information. I would expect them to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming they're both here, I think you will find that Nembhard is a better than adequate replacement. His game is different than Halliburton's, and the team won't be able to do some of the things they did. I'm not suggesting he can fill that spot, but I think you'll find that he's more than adequate. Cotherin, to me, the key for Cotherin is he's got to grow up and get his emotions under control. And it's a double-edged sword, because one of the reasons he is a good player is because he's emotional and because he's passionate. But sometimes that emotion and passion takes him out of his game, and it hurts the team. He's got to learn to control that. He's something that is hard to find, and that's a guy that can score under really any circumstances. And so he's a reliable scorer. Ideally, he would improve defensively. But both of those guys are going to be major players. And depending on what happens with the Turner position, whether it's Jackson or some combination of Jackson, Bryant, and someone else they bring in, or this new guy Huff or whomever, how that evolves will also be a big storyline. But I think they are good enough to make the playoffs. Now we'll see. Are they good enough to contend for the championship? I would be astonished if that happened. But they are good enough, I think, to make the playoffs and to tread water for this year and then take another go at it next summer to retool the roster if you think you need to. Hope that Halliburton comes back at some level close to where he was, and then you take another run at it.
Gotcha. And then one thing I want to ask regarding the Pacers, I thought about it, but then space to ask it. Rick Carlisle, because you saw him when he first was the head coach here in that first run. I think that was his first head coaching gig, if I am correct. And now you're seeing him back here with the Pacers. What about Carlisle's coaching have you seen change, from the first time you saw him to what you've seen in this run too? Because we've talked about it on the pod where, at times, it felt like he was running the offense, but then it came a point, last year in the playoffs and even this season where he's let the reins go on this team and he kind of trusts Halliburton to run the offense and everything else. So your overall perspective on Rick Carlisle.
Well, I've known him since he was an assistant here back in the 90s. So I've known him for almost 30 years. And this was his second head coaching job. He was the head coach before he was here.
Gosh.
And then after that, he was in Dallas and won a championship, and now he's back. He's always been bright and curious, and he always evolves with the game. But the one thing I've noticed, and there are a lot of coaches that can't do this, he has adapted to the modern day player. He used to have a stranglehold on the game. He ran everything from the sideline. Now it's free flowing. He gives players more days off than he used to. He's just evolved, not just as a tactician and a coach, but as an overseer of the whole group. And that cannot be overstated because it's so important. Every guy at this level, every coach at this level knows X's and O's.
Mm-hmm.
What differentiates the really good coaches from the guys that aren't quite that good is the way they handle the rest of the job. And of course, you're reliant on your roster. Here's another slickism for you. When I was new and trying to get it, because I'd done college ball, but this was my first NBA job, and I'm trying to get a feel for how important the coach is. I think a lot of fans think at this level, the coach just throws the ball out there and the guys go hoop it up. And that's not the case. So I asked Slick how important the coach was because he played and coached. And he said to me that the coach was important. And then he said, and this is a line I'll never forget. He said, the coach is important, but he said, I ain't never yet seen no jockey carry a horse across the finish line. You got to have hossies. That's what he called players, hossies. So, just because a coach goes 37 and 45 doesn't mean he's not a good coach. To me, the measure of a good coach is, does he max out what he has? And if his team's only good enough to win 37 games and he gets them to 43, that's pretty good. And so we all judge coaches based on results. It's necessary. It's a results-oriented business. But Carlisle, to me, is in a very small group of coaches that if we're going to sit around and discuss, hey, who are the best coaches of this generation? Now, there's plenty of room to disagree because there's a lot of good ones, but he would have to be at minimum in the conversation.
Awesome. I just I had it in my head and I kind of forgot about it. So it's awesome to hear about that because we've talked about it on the pod, the growth he's made. Darrell, you were there for all his head coaching runs, the first one and this one, and you've talked about how he's changed. My last question for the pod, you kind of talked about it with young broadcasters, getting their starts with all these different media platforms. What is your biggest advice to broadcasters doing TV, to radio, or just trying to get into the business as a whole?
Pay attention and learn, and don't stop working. Repetitions are important. And in today's world, no different than when I was coming up, but easier now than it was when I was coming up. And it's this. There are so many more ways to network now than there used to be. Make as many contacts as you can. And simple things. And this isn't about broadcasting. And by the way, these don't take skill. Show up on time and work your ass off. Those aren't skills. Anyone can do those things, but not a lot of people are willing to do those things. So if you do, you will separate yourself from the competition Now, in the end, you still have to have talent and luck and all that. Any of us who have gotten to this level have received lucky breaks. But my philosophy on that is this: you don't get to control your breaks, but you do get to do something about putting yourself in position to get those breaks. I'll tell you a story that I think will relate to this. When I was maybe 24. I was working in a town called St. Cloud, Minnesota. It's an hour north of Minneapolis. And we were an affiliate for the Minnesota North Stars radio network. And I got a call one day from the sports director at the radio station. He tells me, we got 80 games. That means I've got 160 intermissions I've got to fill. And I'm reaching out to our affiliates to see how many of you guys want to do features on hockey in your town. Will you do one? Well, I didn't want to. I was already working 90 hours a week. I was doing high school games at night, college games at night. I had to get up at 4:30 so I could be on the air at 6 o'clock. I didn't really have time to do it, but I said I would. And I did. And I didn't half-ass it either. I did the best I could. I sent it to them. Now, I don't know if they ever used it. Well, I do now, but I didn't at the time. This is in November. In May, I get a call from the general manager of that radio station. He says, hey, listen, I heard that feature you did on hockey in St. Cloud and I liked it. And I need a sports director. Would you come down and interview for the job? And I did. And I got the job. And it was my first major market job in Minneapolis. And this same guy then became the general manager of the first all sports radio station in America in New York. And he took me there too. He hired me in Minneapolis, in New York, based, well, on the hockey feature. And then I did good work once I got there. But that's what I'm talking about. Don't blow a chance. This is a really difficult profession to make a living in. And if you can't, let's say you get to be 40 and now you've got two kids and you just can't justify it anymore, you want to at least be able to say, I didn't get where I wanted to go, but it wasn't because I didn't try everything possible and work my fingers to the bone. You don't want to be the guy that says, back when I was in my early 30s, I should have worked a little bit harder when I was in, Billings, Montana. You don't want to be that guy. You want to be the guy that either succeeds or if you have to give it up, is able to say, you know what? I did the best I could, and I'm happy with that. You don't want to second guess your effort ever. And effort does not take skill. It is harder some days than others, of course, but it's not a skill, it's a mindset, and anyone can do it.
I love it. I love it. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Darrell, Ramon, great questions. It was great to have you on. Folks, that is going to do it for this episode of the Game Time Podcast. We'll see you guys back next Sunday.